As we get close to wrapping up our phaser game, one of the things that we need to fix is the UI. We need to take this text and our health and move it outside of the game area because it's problematic when things are underneath it, and we need to fix that. So to accomplish that, we're going to add an additional scene that we will be running. So looking in the phaser labs, we'll see in this example where it's set up where there's scene A and scene B, and when I click in the one scene, it's going to then grab an image. So in scene A, when I click, it's going to get scene B, and then it's going to be able to work with that. So if I click OK, it gets an image. Now, I can't, it's just randomly putting that image in some location, so we can see where it's telling scene B to get image. If I look into scene B, we can see that scene B then has a method called getImage. So the two important lines of code are we need to make a reference to the scene that we're trying to access, and then we're able to call a method in that scene. It's also possible when we call that method, we can pass information to it if we want that scene to be aware of that information. So that's what we're going to then implement in our project. To accomplish this, the first thing that we are going to do is create a new file, and this will be my UI scene.js file. So class UI scene extends phaser.scene, and it will have a constructor, and then the constructor will make a standard super call, and I'm going to assign a key to it because then we will have to put this into our config so that we can load this. And as always, just like to keep the naming consistent. And one of the things that we are doing here is we're setting this scene to active. And by doing so, that means this scene is going to be able to load when our game fires up. So now going back into my config, we can see in the config that I only have currently one scene in our array of scenes. Now, as you extend your project, you will have a title scene. You can have, a credit scene, instruction scene, a win scene, lose scene, all those different things to complete your project. But right now, what we want to do is just list the UI scene as part of it. So eventually we'll want to add these scenes back as we did during some of the beginning sample work leading up to this project. But for the time being, we can load that, and now we can see UI scene is not defined because, well, let's see, we never saved it. And now we need to start fleshing out UI scene a little bit more so it gets rid of these error messages and helps us out. So every scene we have our constructor. Now we can set up our create. And now I'm just going to log out. UI scene into it. And we also, like every other thing, every time we add a new file, we do need to remember to add into the code or into the HTML to load it. Now, if we were using modules here instead of loading it as all separate files, and each script had an export on it, and we're working in that method, then we would be able to not have to list every single file here as a script to be loaded. But now we can see it worked. It logged out UI scene. Our game is there running in the background, so that's nice. So progress has been made. Now this UI scene isn't doing much yet. We just proved that it can load, so that's good. Now what we're going to do with this is migrate the health bar and the coins into the UI scene. So the main game will just tell the UI scene to update that information, but it's not going to be controlling that information any longer. So we need to go back into our main game scene, and this is where we're going to start moving some of this information. So when we collide with a coin, yeah, we'll still remove it because the coins are part of the scene. But our coin score and the coin text, I want to pull that out of the main game scene and put that into my UI scene. This also means I want to take the coin text that I have here as part of my create, and let's go see, and we'll be removing the coin score. That's going to leave the create, and we'll move that over. So we're going to, I'll just start out from the top with the coin score. I'm going to copy that and comment it out. And now I go into my UI scene, and now we can put that in, so it's now part of it. Go back into the game scene. Now let's go back down into this, and let's go find, where was that coin text once more. Here's the coin text. Copy that, comment it out, go back into the UI scene and paste that in. Probably need to change this location a little bit, but right now we're just going to leave it. The first step is we're going to move this information into the UI scene. Then we're going to modify our scene so that the UI scene and the main scene are now loading or taking up different places on the screen. So we'll have to do a little bit of work with our camera. So this now moves the coins out. Now I'm going to create a method and call this update coins. And we already have what I want to be in that, which is in the coin collisions right here. So this is where I want to update that information. So I'm going to copy this, comment that out, back into the UI scene, and paste. So that now allows me to update the coins. Now, remembering that the coins are part of the main, or they're now part of the UI scene, so we need to be able to access them. So I'm just going to save this, because then once we save on the main one, we'll see our game updated. But if we go back into the Phaser Labs and take a look at what's there, we see that we need to make a reference to the scene, this scene.get, and then we can tell that scene to call a method. So going back into our code, what I am going to do here is say let UI equal this dot scene dot get UI scene, and then UI dot, and let me just verify, so we have update coins. So UI update coins. So we're now able to tell the coins to update as part of it. So I'll save this. Let's go over into the project and start collecting some coins, and we can see that the coins are updating. But now, between resets, my coins are not resetting. So we're going to have to now address how to reset the coins as part of this, which means when the scene replays, we need to have a reset method for it. And what we can do during this reset method is set this dot coin score. We'll set that back equal to 0. What we also want to do to cover our butts is this dot coin text set text coins plus this dot coin score. Because otherwise, if we don't do this, it's not going to change the value that it's showing on screen until we collect our next first coin. So we've updated the coin score, but we've never reset the text. So that's why we need to reset the text as part of that. So that takes care of that. But we need to figure out where to call that. And we're calling that when we look at where the scene restarts. The scene restarts when the player and enemy collision and let's see, so once our health is less than 0, this is where we're going to want to work on calling this. So after we have done our fade out, we've gone through our different coins and clean those up, making sure that they've been destroyed so that we get all fresh new ones. I'm just going to get rid of that right there. We can just say let UI, not US, UI equal this dot scene dot get UI scene, and then UI dot reset. So that allows us to call reset on it. So now let's try our game over here. Collect, collect, collect. We got some 4 coins. Now let's try to, there. And coins are back to 0. Perfect. So the coins are resetting. So we're in good shape there. Now comes the health bar. The health bar is not too different in that as we work with the health bar, we're just going to, instead of attaching the health bar to our main project, so we'll still, well, the health bar doesn't have any graphics for loading, so that doesn't even matter there, and they would be in the health anyway. But, see under create, we'll wander down until we find this player, there's monsters and enemies, there's the health bar. So the health bar, we're going to load the health bar inside UI. So I'm going to copy that, comment that out. Let's go into UI scene so that we can load this here. And after we've completed the text, then we'll get the health bar and put our health bar in. We will probably need to reposition everything as part of this. And that now gives us the health bar. Now, the thing on the health bar is the health bar, its updates are contained within it. So if we go back and look at the health bar, we can see that the health bar's method. So the health bar has its method for containing it versus the coins, we're just displaying that text information. So it doesn't make, we don't really need a separate class for the coin information. We certainly could, but we don't really need it. I mean, to that end, this health bar information we could almost put in, you know, it doesn't have to be its own object per se, but I think it's just a lot cleaner if we do leave it that way. So the health bar has now been added into the UI scene. So I'm just going to save that. Now, because the health bar is part of the UI scene, we need to go into both the gems and inside the player enemy collisions, because both of those occasions are where we are changing health information. So if we look under here, previously we just tell the health bar to update health inside the player gem collision. But now inside the player gem collision, what I want to do is say let UI equal this dot scene dot get UI scene. And now that health bar does not belong to the current scene, health bar belongs to UI scene. So that's an easy update or fix for it right there. So that takes care of the gems. But now, when we move into the player and the enemy, we need to modify it here as well. So we have this UI line down here. So what I want to do is move that up to here, because that way it will be accessible to everything in this function. So now the UI scene is here. Change UI right there. So now the health bar is updated there, and we're able to reset the health down here. So let's give it a whirl and see what happens. There's a health bar, running into things, there's coins, come on. Sometimes, wait a second. The health is already, so my health seems that it's having, it's still using that final hit and then saying, oh, I died, and then subtracting. So what we're going to do is go into the UI scene, and inside the UI scene, while we update the score, this dot health bar dot update health, and we'll just pass in 100 into it. Now let's see how that works. So I've been looking at the code trying to figure out why every time I die, my health starts out at 90. So when the game resets, and even if I do a forced reset, start the whole thing over, we're at 90 and it shakes as if I've been hit when it launched. And I went through in the code, digging around, trying to figure out what's happening in the enemy collision, looking at old code where it's not happening, looking at lots of logging out of the data, trying to figure out what is going on with it, making sure all the enemies are gone between rounds, and it's not working. And finally, dawned on me with that shake, what was happening is that these two ghosts sitting right here, so that when the game resets, they're right on top of you. So what I need to do is to erase these two out of here so that the player starts in a relative safe zone. I'm going to save that, and let's just export it out. So it exports out new information. And now, if we go back into and reset, now we can see that we start out at 100. Our health is not impeded at the beginning, and we're in good shape. So it was puzzling me because I couldn't figure out why every time it reset that I was losing or missing health. Now I do want to just comment about these two things. Sometimes there's some weird glitches where either coins or the enemies don't seem to want to reset between scene restarts, and this guarantees all the old ones are gone before the scene restarts, and that just seems to be a little housekeeping item that causes fewer glitches in the process. So that explains the bug there. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to adjust the camera size, make it a little bit smaller, and then reposition the UI elements so that they're sitting outside of the camera area so that players, creatures, or the map are not hidden behind them. So to resize and reposition what we have on screen, this is where we're going to modify the camera. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to make the camera smaller. So this .cameras.main.height will be equal to 288. So our original camera was, if we look in the config file, we'll see it's 400 by 320. So we're going to shrink it down a little bit. And I will be pulling it in 16 from each side and pushing it down. So we'll set the height at 288. And our width will be at 368. So now, if I save this, let's see what happens. We can see that we have things shrinking down a little bit. Now what we want to do is go this .cameras.main.set position, and we will set the position to 16 and 16. And we can see how we've pushed the camera over on the screen. And if I were doing this in person and had set it up, there we go, that works a little bit better. So if I was doing it in person, someone would have told me that I did height twice. I did height and height, and I was like, why is it not working? Okay, let me just keep going a little bit here and see if my brain can process. And this is part of the troubleshooting method. Now, when we look at this, we can see when I work through here, we can be aware that if we had a much larger map, so if our game was much larger, then we get this nice camera movement as we work our way through the world. So that gives us the resizing, repositioning of our scene. Now this gray I'm not particularly fond of. I want to change that a little bit, and that gray is in the config for the main game, so we can now change this to a different value. So I'm going to go for a dark blue-violet. So a little bit of red, tiny bit of green, and more blue. Let's see if that gives me, now I get this deep blue. So we're off to a good start. Now that I've pushed it down and resized it, what we need to do is to adjust what's happening in the UI scene a little bit. So click over into the UI scene, and this time with my health bar. So I'm going to take this health bar and let's just put it at 0, 0 and see what happens. Now when I save, we can see that it's all the way up at 0, 0. So that now tells me I'm getting closer. Now if I want to push it in a little bit from the margin, each of these tiles is 16. So if I want to go half of a tile, that would be 8. Bop it down a little bit from the top so it's kind of centered within there, because we made it about kind of, a little more than a half tile tall. That moves it down, it fills, we get a little kind of 2 pixel, so that's now giving me the gap. It fits in there nicely. We do need to now move the coins and reposition the coins on here. So the X, I can leave that value. Let's try that, and now we can see the coins and health seem to be lining up. So I've been able to now move my UI content outside of my main game. The main game now is a smaller camera view of the larger world. So if my actual game was not 400 by 320, but was maybe even double that, 800 by 640, so I could really go and explore this map and interact with all these different enemies, collecting more health gems, collecting more coins. We are moving this in the direction of a complete and finished game project.